Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going behind the scenes, getting into the world of digital research. How do researchers actually study online behavior? What are the methods? What are some of the challenges? What about those aha moments they find along the way?
It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
a backstage pass to see how the magic happened.
Exactly. And our guide for this deep dive is the book Digital Research Confidential. It's edited by Eszter Hargittai and Christian Sandvig. And it's this collection of essays from leading researchers. And I think what's so cool about this book is it doesn't shy away from how messy and real this work is.
Yeah, it's not like your typical textbook, dry academic writing. There are real stories in here and advice you won't really find in a super polished research paper.
Yeah, they're letting us in on the secret handshake of digital research. It's like all the tricks of the trade and the lessons they've learned along the way.
Yeah. And that's what makes this deep dive so valuable. Whether you're a seasoned researcher yourself or a student or just curious about this digital world we live in, understanding how these methods work can give you a whole new perspective on how we understand online behavior these days.
Okay, so let's start with the why. Why is studying digital behavior so important in the first place?
Well, think about it. Our lives are so online now. We work online, we shop, we connect with family and friends, consume news, even participate in the political discourse, all online. So to really understand how our society is changing, I think we need to understand how people are behaving in these online spaces.
Right, it's like this whole new layer of the human experience. And digital research is kind of the key to unlock all these mysteries.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting is that the traditional research methods, they're not equipped to handle all the complexities of online behavior. So researchers have had to create new tools and new approaches, specifically for this digital landscape.
And that's where Digital Research Confidential comes in. It's like we get this peek behind the curtain and we see all the messy and unpredictable parts of doing this work.
Yeah, and the editors of the book talk about this in the preface, how it's really important for researchers to be more open about the struggles they face and how, you know,
Yeah.
it's important to share the difficulties of certain projects.
Yeah, it's so refreshing. It's like they're saying, hey, we're all in this together. We all hit roadblocks and make mistakes. Let's just learn from each other.
Right. It makes the whole research process more human, more relatable, and I think more accessible to everyone.
Like they're inviting us into this club
Ah,
and saying, come on in, the water's fine.
and what I like is that it not only tells you about the challenges, but also it equips you with the tools to overcome them, like a master class in navigating digital research.
And one of the things that just struck me when we're diving into the book is just how many different research methods there are.
Right. It's like this toolbox full of really cool tools.
I was lost in the chapter titles. We've got analyzing archives of old websites for historical research to studying the visual data from online platforms to understand new forms of social interaction, even a whole chapter on studying flash mobs.
Imagine trying to track and analyze this rapidly evolving event that's happening online and offline at the same time. It's a big challenge. And these researchers walk you through how they did it.
So we talked about why digital research is so important, and we've got a taste of how they're doing it. But let's dive into some specific examples of how these methods play out in practice and the insights they're uncovering.
Yeah, let's get into it. You know, one of the chapters that really stood out to me was the one about researching teenagers online.
Oh yeah, teenagers online. It's such a fascinating area of study, but I can only imagine all the challenges that come with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about it. Teenagers are digital natives.
Hmm.
We've grown up with the internet. Their online lives are so intertwined with who they are offline. Researchers have to be super careful and sensitive when studying them.
Yeah, it's not just observing what they're doing online, but it's about building trust and rapport in a digital environment.
Right. And the researcher in this chapter talks about spending months just immersed in these online communities, just carefully watching how teenagers interact,
Yeah.
slowly gain their trust. They even had to learn all this new teen slang
Hmm.
and navigate all these different social media platforms and be really mindful of the power dynamics.
Wow, so it's kind of like digital anthropology, immersing yourself in this culture that exists online.
That's a great way to put it. And what's so cool is that the researchers were able to uncover these insights
Yeah.
that traditional methods would have missed. Like they found that teens use humor and irony online to navigate sensitive topics. And they express their emotions in ways they might not be comfortable doing offline.
That makes so much sense. It's like they have this safe space online to explore different parts of who they are.
Yeah. And these insights can be really valuable for educators and parents and anyone who works with teens.
Yeah, it helps us understand their world a bit better.
Now, Another chapter I really liked was the one about analyzing internet log data to study social networks.
Okay, so for those of us who don't know, what is internet log data?
So think of it as a digital footprint. Every time you visit a website or click a link or interact with some online platform, a record of that activity is stored. Researchers can look at all that data to study these patterns of online behavior.
Okay, so it's like this massive map of how people are navigating the digital world.
Exactly. And in this chapter, the researcher was really interested in studying how friendships form in virtual worlds.
Oh, wow. How do you even begin to define friendship in a virtual space?
That's a great question. And that's something the researcher had to figure out. So they ended up using a combination of quantitative data, like the frequency and duration of interactions between users, and qualitative data, like the content of those interactions, to develop this measure of friendship.
So it's not just about counting clicks, but understanding the meaning behind them.
Yeah. And they found that friendships in these virtual worlds often form through shared activities and interests, just like offline.
So some basic human dynamics are at play, whether we're talking about face-to-face or through a screen.
Right. And this research helps us understand online communities and how they maybe mirror or even change offline social structures.
Like we're creating these new social norms for the internet.
And the rules are still being written. Now this leads us to another chapter, the one about using real names in published research.
Ooh, that's got to be tricky. I imagine there's a lot of ethical concerns there.
Oh yeah, for sure. You see, research participants are normally guaranteed anonymity to protect their privacy, but when you study online behavior, where people use their real names, things get a lot more complicated.
Right, like the line between public and private is blurred online.
Exactly. So researchers have to weigh these potential benefits of using real names, like, adding context to the data, against the risk to someone's privacy and well-being.
Yeah, there's no easy answer there.
And that's why this chapter is so good. It lays out all the arguments and encourages you to think about the ethics of research.
It really highlights how digital research is always pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, we're still kind of making the rules up as we go along.
You mentioned earlier that this book also covers historical web research, which I'm kind of curious about. It seems like a tough place to do historical research, since things change and disappear so quickly.
It is, like you said, it's not like you can just walk into an archive and sift through these old documents.
So how do they even approach historical research in such a, fluid environment?
Well, they have to think outside the box when it comes to sources.
Yeah.
It's not just about finding these old websites. Researchers look at things like blog posts, forum discussions, social media updates. They even look at these archived versions of web pages using the Wayback Machine. It's like they become these digital detectives trying to piece together a story from these little bits of information.
Yeah, that's a good. You really need to know what you're doing and be able to, use those traditional historical methods.
Exactly. Yeah. And in the book, there's this one researcher who is studying the history of this online community. That was a big part of a social movement. But most of the content was gone.
Oh, wow. So how do you even do that?
Well, they got creative.
Yeah.
Instead of just looking at, official records, they reached out to members of that community, people who were active way back then. They did interviews, collected personal stories, even gathered old emails and chat logs. It was like putting together all these memories of something that was almost forgotten.
Yeah, that's such a good example of how this kind of research is more collaborative. It's not just some person in a library. It's about connecting with people and hearing their stories.
Yeah, and in doing so, the researcher got this much deeper understanding of the community, much more than just using the traditional methods.
It's amazing how digital research can make history feel so alive.
Like you're opening a window to the past. You can see how these online communities and social movements and even cultural trends have changed.
You realize that the internet is more than just, stuff that comes and goes. It's a record of what we've done.
Yeah, and digital research is giving us new ways to look at it.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Digital Research Confidential, I'm just amazed by the researchers in this book. They're always trying new things, finding these new ways to study online behavior, discovering insights that we couldn't have imagined years ago.
Yeah, it's really all about human curiosity and this need to learn.
And I can't wait to see what comes next. As our lives online keep changing, so will the way we study it.
We're just getting started.
Well said. And on that note, we encourage you to check out Digital Research Confidential and keep learning about this really cool field. Thanks for joining us.